Hi, good morning. Thank you guys for being here. My name is Michelle Davis, and I will be serving as a mediator for both of you this morning. I want to thank you first for coming here and remind you that this is a voluntary process. I hope that we're going to be able to achieve a meaningful or beneficial outcome for both parties, hopefully at the end of this, or at least begin a discourse to get there. Um, we have a few just ground rules. I ask that you not interrupt each other, allow each other to completely finish your thoughts and statements, try and answer questions as completely as you can. And I just remind you all to always use respectful tones, language, and hopefully, we can have a discourse that is respectful and thoughtful and helps us to get to some kind of resolution. So I'll start with you, Sammy. I'd love to hear a little bit about why you all are here and what has brought you to mediation.
All right, so hi Michelle, nice to meet you. I'm Daniel, and I came to mediation because I was working with Michael on this community project. It's for renewable energy and something that I'm really passionate about. Michael seemed to be really passionate about, and we had this partnership because I'm the person on the ground. I was the man on the ground. I know the community. I have a great rapport and trust with the community. And I did a lot of the legwork that really got this project off the ground and got it running, built all the community trust, had the local knowledge. He had no idea where to even go, how to get the investors. And I put a lot of my money into this project. And after, a year of really working on the project, having personal investment in this project, using my community connections to get it running and going, all of a sudden Michael started icing me out. He started making deals and having meetings with people, never spoke to me about it. I would be asked on the street about the updates on the project and couldn't answer the questions because Michael never invited me to the meetings. I would come to the meeting and realize decisions were already made. And, I thought that Michael and I were business partners, that we were equal in this situation. I literally was putting my best foot forward, put all again, a lot of personal investment in this. And then all of a sudden just got iced out. And every time I try to talk to Michael about it, he act like I was tripping. He tried to make it seem like I was angry. He tried to make it seem like I was being unreasonable, being difficult, emotional. And it's like, of course I'm a little emotional. This is my community. I'm the reason why this was able to even happen. I put my personal money on there, put my name and my connections on the street out there, and to just be completely iced out and not understanding why. I just need to understand. I need some clarity. I need to understand. Um, and we need to have some sort of resolution because this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and I'm not being irrational just because um I feel like I deserve some answers.
Thank you. And so I guess I should have said this in my opening. I'm going to take notes. These notes are just for my personal benefit, and I won't be keeping them after the mediation. And I should also remind you both that this is a confidential session, and nothing that you say here can be potentially used in court. So thank you for sharing. It sounds like what you're seeking today is some sort of justification or conversation from Francis about, or Michael, sorry, about what happened and why he started interacting with community partners without you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I want to understand that. And, at this point, it doesn't feel like this business partnership is going to work. And so we need to
Okay.
figure something else out.
Okay. So if I'm hearing that, you're considering terminating the business partnership entirely.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm open to figuring something out about the business partnership.
Okay.
Clearly, it's not working.
All right. Thank you. Michael, could I hear a little bit from you about what's going on?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, it is, you know, me and Daniel, we entered into a partnership arrangement. And for me, my understanding was that, you know, there was clarity in role. And for me, I understood my role was, I was responsible for things like financing, regulatory approval, and overall execution. Now, with that understanding for me, those roles require, quick decision making. And in in order to, you know, decide based on that, I went ahead and true, I did make decisions without involving Daniel. And the reason why I did that is not because I'm trying to keep Daniel out. I was just trying to get the job done. And I think the confusion here is maybe the misunderstanding on number one, role clarity, and number two, what it takes or how we are supposed to execute on those roles. And I'm hoping that from today's session, we are going to be able to, maybe figure out, or clarify the confusion that brought us to mediation. Or if not, we can talk about, all right, if the partnership cannot be continued anymore, then what's next? But I don't feel like we are at that positions where we can talk about what is next outside of the partnership, because I think that the issue that brought us to mediation is really just the confusion or lack of clarity regarding roles and how to execute those roles.
Okay, thanks, Francis. So I've heard you both talk about the two distinct roles that you had in the partnership. Francis, it sounds like you did a lot more work along the regulatory side, um, and the compliance side. And Michael, it sounds like you did, sorry, I forget your name. Daniel, it sounds like you did a lot of work related to community partnerships, establishing the partnerships, and bringing the business financial capital to the partnership. Is that correct? My understanding of your roles.
For the most part, yeah.
Did you ever write out a position description or have a clear articulation of the two different roles that you had in the partnership? Was that something either of you ever did at any point?
No, we went into this, in my opinion, off of good faith. We knew what each of our strengths were. And, like you just said, Michelle, I brought in a lot of the financial capital. And so, I don't understand why contracts are being signed, money's being moved, timelines are changing, and Michael didn't tell me. So it sounds like Michael's moving into my role, based off of what you just shared, Michelle, and, based off of what Michael said. So it sounds like you're in my role. So you're talking about roles aren't clear. If roles aren't clear, I feel fairly clear on what my role is. It sounds like Michael's over here moving out of his lane.
Okay. Um, Daniel, thanks for sharing. Michael, I'd like to address a couple of things that Daniel just said. Because you were assigned more informally to do the government compliance work, i- can you talk to me a little bit about how you began generating contracts? How did that relate to your compliance work?
Mhm. What do you mean, generate contract?
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, Daniel's upset or Daniel feels that you in the course of your pendency or in the pendency of your business relationship, you started not just doing government compliance work and making sure that the organization was up to par with government standards, but you also began engaging with community partners and executing contract agreements or
Mhm.
moving money and resources from the organization around without talking to him first. So I'm just trying to understand, when did that begin to happen and why?
Yeah, that has been, you're asking how I started approving payment for projects.
Correct.
That has always been like that. The only distinction is that I did not tell Michael about it. I approve the payment of project. I have
When
always been doing that.
when you initially began doing that, at some point though, you did discuss with Daniel the approval of the project before it was approved, correct?
Not necessarily. It has not always been like we sit down, discuss things before execution. That has not always been the case. We were informal about it.
I'm hearing that word from both of you now, and so I guess my follow-up question to that informality is, at a certain point, it sounds like you both realized something wasn't working. Did you try to have a meeting about formalizing your roles,
Not that I know of.
Daniel?
No, I didn't feel like there was a need to. I supposedly, I trusted this person. So
I understand. Uh, but trust or not, at a certain point, you both began to feel like there was a breakdown in communication and something about the partnership wasn't working. And it sounds like this is the first time you're sitting down together and having a discussion about that. Is that correct? Am I understanding that?
no, I every time I try to bring up these issues to Michael in the past, he just blew me off trying to make it seem like I was being overly emotional, and I was being difficult about it. So I raised these concerns to him, and every time at first I raised it and I was chill about it. I was like, "Hey, like this is what I'm seeing. Why is this happening?" There'd be reports that especially around the reporting. So he's supposed to be the man who makes sure that everything gets through correctly. But I'm getting reports, financial reports that are late, missing details. There's no explanations around like changes and charges. And so when I tried to talk to him about it, he just blew me off and made it seem like I was angry, or I was being emotional. But it's like these are real red flags, and he's not communicating the way that he used to. So I feel like the real question is, Michael, why didn't you communicate the way that you were supposed to communicate with me? I've been here. So I haven't changed how I communicate. He started moving funny.
Mhm.
Okay, Daniel, I wanna try our best because that's your characterization and that's how you feel about the situation. But I want to do our best to allow everybody to talk without putting words in each other's mouths and to figure out what's going on here. So it sounds like at a certain point, Michael's conduct began to change, and you observed that the work product wasn't necessarily the same. Michael, would you say that that's a fair evaluation or assessment of what was happening?
Yeah, I am honestly, I'm hearing the dissatisfaction with the work product for the first time here. For me, I thought the issue was Michael not being included in my decisions to keep certain project running. And for me, I admitted that yes, I did not involve Michael in that decision simply because I felt like, you know, uh, there was agency that I needed to decide, and the decision ought to be done, and it could not wait for, an extended discussion. For me, that's what I thought is the issue. But if there is an issue with dissatisfaction, I mean, if there is dissatisfaction with the work product, I'm open to hearing about that. But I didn't know.
Thank you, Michael. Daniel, can you talk to me a little bit about your satisfaction with Michael's performance and the performance metrics that you guys had in place internally? Sounds like you said that you had an expectation that he was doing compliance reports, and at a certain point, you observed that the compliance reports weren't correct or that information was submitted to the adjudicative entity without all of the fields filled out or without everything that needed to be in the report. Did you discuss that with Michael? Because it sounds like he's saying you never did.
Like I, you know, Michael, I've told you already that I've spoken to you about it. You made it seem like I was being emotional or overly difficult. Like there's times where I would come to meetings and y'all already had conversations and decisions were already made. You were sidelighting me. I was confused by it. I've shared with you, Michael, all these things already. I already shared those things with you. You know, I would check in with other team members about some of the reports or what's going on, and depending on who I spoke to on the team, I got different information. And I hear, Michael, that you're saying that there was some urgency. If it's urgent, you could pick up the phone and call me. If we're supposed to be equal business partners in this venture, you could pick up and call the phone because when you want me to make a decision or you need a decision to be made, I always called you, make sure, because we were supposed to be 50-50 on this, and I gave you that respect. And so to me, there's nothing, we're not doing brain surgery. We're not doing open heart surgery, so no one's going to die if we take a few minutes to call and make sure that we're at one accord. And so I don't understand, Michael, what you're talking about regarding like urgency. If something's urgent, you could call me and we could have worked it out. So I've spoken to you about this, and I just feel that, you know, if we're supposed to be partners, if all the work in the beginning that I did for us to even get this off the ground, like there needs to be some acknowledgement about how you start moving funny with me, Michael. There needs to be some sort of acknowledgement about how you stop communicating with me, how decisions were made, how like all the labor that I did in the beginning is the reason why we're even having the success, like we're having the success that we have now.
Daniel,
So
I'm
it
gonna I'm gonna stop you briefly, Daniel, because I wanna talk about something that you're saying and something that I'm hearing. I want to make sure that we're all hearing and saying the same thing, or say you're saying what I think I'm hearing and that Michael's hearing it. So it sounds like what you want most from Michael right now is acknowledgement. Does that acknowledgement come in the form of an apology?
No, I don't necessarily need an apology, but I do feel like he needs to acknowledge the work that I've done, acknowledge the shifts that he made, how it's impacted me, and how we would not be able to even have this business if it weren't for all of my labor, you know? And so that needs to be acknowledged. He needs to be able to talk about that. And he needs to be able to explain because he's making it seem like this is normal. It's not normal to just all of a sudden cut out your business partner. Like there's no justification for that. That's not normal to all of a sudden say, oh, well, I had to make this urgent decision that normally I would have talked to you about, but I decided not to do it anymore. What's the
Okay.
justification about that?
Daniel, again, I want to remind you that we're talking about our own perspective. So you feel you feel the way you feel, but there's no real sort of normal. Um, I understand that there was a departure from the way that you guys were interacting, but that's Michael, what I'm hoping to get a little bit more information about. Michael, are you there?
Mm-hmm.
So if you could talk to me a little bit about what you're hearing from Daniel, about the extent to which you feel you can acknowledge, um, whether verbally or in writing, his contributions to the business, and how you're feeling now that we're having this conversation. Daniel's introduced that he had some performance concerns. You've indicated your reason and justification for holding some meetings and performing certain business activities without him. So that's a recap of where we are. What do you
Mhm.
think, Michael, you could do, or what do you feel comfortable doing about the information Daniel shared today?
Yeah, I want to start from here. I want to start by truly letting Daniel know that, you know, I do acknowledge his contribution, tremendous contribution to, the business. And I know that we will not be where we are right now if it wasn't for both our dedication, sacrifice, and determination. It brought us here. And I also want to acknowledge that, you know, I can only imagine how frustrating it is to feel like you're not being included or you're not being involved in even the clarification of why things happened the way they happened. And I want to let Michael know that the decisions that I made to keep, you know, uh, this project running without involving him was not because I felt like it was ineffective or was not because I had anything against him. Rather, I thought that, a decision had to be made. And me making that decision was purely on what I thought was in the best interest of the business and the best interest of ensuring success in this project.
Thank you, Michael.
Moving,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
you,
interrupt.
no, no, you're good.
Thank you, Michael. So, Daniel, one of the things you just asked for very specifically was acknowledgement, and Michael just gave you that acknowledgement. How are you feeling? How are you receiving that?
I mean, so are you asking me if I feel like Michael just gave me that acknowledgement?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure 'cause it sounded like you said he gave it to me, but I feel like that was kind of he acknowledged it, but he didn't explain, in my opinion, why he made decisions that directly impact my role. So I appreciate you acknowledging that I did the legwork and that my role was important in the beginning, and I'm still wanting to understand why you made those decisions without me because it directly impacts my ability to do my job and as a partner, Michael. So I want to understand that more too. So I appreciate you saying like, yeah, but and you saying that you made these decisions in an urgent way for the benefit the business. To me, I feel like it like, are you saying that by pausing and actually including the person who made the connections, that's not putting the best interest of the business first?
No, I am saying that, for example, with the energy project that I issued funding for without involving you, there was a tight deadline. There was a tight deadline, and you do know, since you were, involved in that conversation, you do know that the dead we were two I issued that funding 2 days before the deadline, so that was the deadline was part of it. And you also know in that proposal that if you fail to meet that deadline, the cost was more. So I thought it was number one, avoiding the increase in cost, and number two, avoiding, not avoiding, the deadline, trying to do everything within that deadline. Those were the two things. Those were the two reasons why I made those decisions.
Okay. I hear that, and I just feel like again, you could have said something before, like 2 days, it could be a quick text, quick phone call, hey, this deadline's coming up. Um,
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I appreciate you
Daniel,
explaining that, Michael. I really appreciate you explaining that. So that I have some understanding about why you made that decision.
Mhm. And
Okay. So
before you
I'm gonna pause
before
both
you come
parties
in
right now
before you
for
come in mediator, I just wanted to say one thing. Uh, if I was in your shoes, I probably will also feel the same. And I just want to let you know that I am sorry. I should have included you, and I truly want you to know that it was not because of you. Those were the two reasons why I made those decisions.
thank you, Michael. Daniel, do you have anything to say to Michael's apology?
No.
Okay. So it sounds like, Daniel, you were seeking justification for why Michael took certain actions. Michael, I appreciate your context and you providing some answers there. At the beginning of this, you both said that you would be willing to consider how to continue your business relationship. You both acknowledged that there is a lack of clarity and formality in your roles and the allocation of the roles as business partners. Would it be helpful moving forward if I were to help you guys draft? Well, first I should say, are you willing to continue working with each other as business partners?
Yeah, for me, yeah. I don't see a reason why I should not work with Daniel. I have two options. Well, not I have two options. I feel like we have two options right now. We're either gonna continue working together, and if that is something that both of us want, then we have to figure out, okay, how can we ensure that moving forward we are fully aligned on what that will look like, what is expected of each of us? That is option number one. Option number two, if we feel like we are at a point where we cannot work together, then we explore what that would look like, you know.
Thank
So
you, Michael. Daniel,
I'm open to us talking about restructuring or potential buyout, so
you're open to dissolving the, I'm sorry, can you say that again
I
differently?
said I'm open to restructuring, so figuring out the structure or shifting what the business structure looks like, our roles, etc. Or, if we want to dissolve it, Michael could buy me out of the business.
Uh, so I mean, I think that's a really big fork to come to. Michael, it sounds like still wants to continue the business relationship. Daniel, maybe I can ask again. Right now, after this conversation, are you in a space that you feel comfortable continuing the business relationship with, as you said, a little bit more clarification on the roles and the allocation of responsibilities for each party?
Yeah, I'm open to exploring either one of those things.
Okay. Would it be helpful for me as a mediator to help you guys draft PD's position descriptions that maybe make uh, both of your roles a little bit clearer to one another that we can keep on file with the charter of the organization so that it's very clear what you guys expect from one another in your roles? Would that be something that would be helpful? Michael, would that be helpful?
I think before we get to drafting that, Daniel, gave two things. Number one, discussing, let's say, buyout. What would that look like? And number two, future partnership or not future, continuation of this partnership. What would that look like? I think before you go into that, I'd love to hear what those two options look like before we get into the drafting.
Thank you, Michael.
Are you asking me that, Michael?
Yes, I am.
So I think, you know, Daniel, I think we can take a pause and sit and write out what we feel our roles are with the team, who makes what decisions, how we're going to make decisions, and then you and I can circle back to each other and see if we're in alignment. If we're not, then we can move towards if we're not able to come up with something, then we can move towards dissolving the business relationship. How do you feel about that, Daniel? I
Yeah,
mean, Michael.
yeah, I think that's a good way forward. And I guess for me, what I was trying to get at is before we say the mediator draft that for us, we have to meet and maybe pull out those specific things. And then if we want the mediator to formalize it, then we can send it to the mediator to formalize it, as opposed to the mediator generating what that should look like for both of us.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel we can handle that outside. I
That
appreciate
sounds
you,
great.
Michael.
Mhm.
That sounds great, guys. And just to clarify, I was not going to just draft an agreement willy-nilly without your consent. I just wanted to help have, create a space for both of you to sit down and clearly articulate your roles. But it sounds like that's the plan, forging and moving forward. Um, again, I thank you both for your openness and willingness to be here today. I think we made a lot of progress in terms of just clearly articulating ourselves. Thank you both for being respectful consistently throughout and trying your best to use iMessages and not accusatory language. And, I'm going to follow up to this mediation session with an email recapping what we did today. And we can talk a little bit more at that point about timelines and benchmarks and what other services I can provide to you both in the future, should you need me again. So, thanks again, both of you, for being here. And I'll send that email at the close of, but before the close of the business day.
Mhm. Perfect. Well, thank you so very much, mediator. I feel like you're right. We did make a lot of progress, and I'm looking forward to see what future have in store for both Daniel and myself.
That's great. All right, guys. Bye.
Bye bye. And on this note, we are gonna transition into our debrief right now. So request the uh, I request Harold and Paula to come back on the video, and let's start with Michelle herself. Now that you finished your simulation, how do you feel? How did it go for you? What specific things that you felt like, you know what, I did this, I'm really happy about this, I want to carry it forward, and those that you have question on.
I
Okay.
thought you guys did, both of you did a really good job. I always, the intro statement is the hardest for me because I always forget like major parts of it. And then I find myself going back and saying, oh yeah, and, so I do need to keep getting better at that with practice. But this was good. I think the parties were respectful. They maintained a respectful tone, which always makes it easier. So you don't feel like you have to be a teacher or a mom with two adults. And yeah, I felt like this went well. We were able to get them to open up and talk, which was really the goal. I think they just both wanted to feel heard. But really, Daniel seemed to want an explanation more than anything, um, financial or to recoup his losses. He wanted to understand, which obviously makes the mediation a little bit easier because you can let the parties just talk
Mhm.
when they're doing so respectfully. So I thought it went well.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about, getting parties to open up and talk, you as a mediator, what skill did you use to get parties to opening up and speaking?
I I usually try to keep my tone the way that I did, soft, consistent. Every time I noticed, Michael looking down or like Daniel looking away, I try to call your name, call you by name to kind of get you re-engaged and refocused. And I think consistently saying thank you when somebody shares a feeling, a thought, or something that might be difficult for the other party to hear, thanking them, recapping, reminding, restating. Those are, I think, the big things that I do as a
Mhm.
mediator.
Active listening, like
Hmm.
paying close attention to nonverbal cues and also that calm demeanor. Okay,
Yeah.
let's go to parties themselves. Sammy.
All right. So nice to meet you, Michelle.
Nice to meet
Dylan's probably laughing because Dylan knows how I am in these. So, same with Francis. So, um, yes, I will say that the opening statement needs to be stronger. There needs to be some more confidence in there. Um, and I will, when you said that, you said you're a mother, right?
Yeah, his name
Yeah.
is actually Michael, so that was so funny when I was like, Michael, are you listening?
Okay. Well, the reason why I asked that is because one of the things I wrote down is the opening statement felt paternalistic. And so it
Yeah.
felt like a parent speaking. And I was like, I'm not a kid. Like that was the first thought I had was I am not a child. Do not speak to me like I'm one. Don't give me these
Listen, I
ground
can't help it.
rules.
That's just how I talk to people now.
Okay. But I will say because of that, from the beginning, I was like, oh, I'm about to be hella defensive.
Yeah,
Hella defensive.
yeah.
And that's what you saw throughout it. Like I was like, no, don't talk to me paternalistically. Um, and so I'd want to say like be mindful of that because the opening statement sets the entire tone of the entire mediation. And so from the beginning, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna mess with this mediator.
Thank
Um,
you. That's
I,
helpful.
yeah. I also want to say I recommend trying to ask a question. I can't remember what question you had asked, but I wrote down instead, right, what did decision making look like in the beginning of the project? And
Mhm.
so I don't remember what question you had asked Michael or myself, or asked Francis or myself, but it was about our decision making, and it felt like you were leading as opposed to just saying, what did decision making look like in the beginning? So that the two parties, we can describe it, as opposed to you trying to describe it and give like characteristic to it. So how we ask questions are really important because of that. I felt like you were leading in some ways. And the way that the question was asked, it made me feel like you were on Michael's side. So that was the other piece. And I felt like that throughout. I felt like there was a lack of neutrality, like the tone that you used with Michael, and maybe because that's your kid's name, but the tone you used with Michael was very different than the tone you used with me. It felt like you were defending him at points. And so if I would say something that felt, you asked me not to characterize his feelings or his behavior. And so when you did that, I was like, you're defending him. Like, don't
Mm.
defend him, right? And so instead, even if a party is being difficult, because I tend to be the difficult party, but
No, I
even,
got that. I got that.
but even if the party is difficult, how can you reflect what is being said in a neutral way that does not make it feel like you're choosing one person or the other? Be consistent. If you have the same tone, like if you have a particular tone with Michael, and make sure that Daniel has that tone. So it was very, and my background is social work. I used to work with youth, and so it's very clear to me. I was like, no, it's not the same tone, not the same energy, and so. I got to a point where I was like, I'm not even gonna talk to her. And so I just started talking directly to Daniel
Yeah.
and like ignored anything you asked me for the most part was or did not engage. Because like even though he gave me what I wanted, because you said to me, sounds like he gave you the acknowledgement you wanted, I was like, you don't know that. You don't know if we did that. So I just wanted to say like we have to be really mindful. Like ask questions before we make a statement. And we have to make sure however we engage with one party, we're engaging the same way with the other one.
That's really helpful. I do think in a couple of the mediations I've had, it can be difficult to walk the line when one party's a little more aggressive than the other, because you want to think about how to keep both parties engaged and make sure that the more vocal or slightly more aggressive party doesn't kind of just take over the whole mediation. But you're right, I do need to still maintain consistent neutral tone between both parties. I just didn't want Michael to stop engaging. And I saw him looking down, looking off screen, kind of like going in and out. And so I was trying to keep him engaged, but don't want to do that at the expense of antagonizing the other party. So that's good, thoughtful stuff to keep in mind.
Mhm. Before I go to Harold, I just wanted to add that you are the expert of the process, right? If you see that maybe one party is either hijacking or either is making the process not go as you as a mediator you want the process to go, you definitely can, talk to that party about it, but you don't want to do it in front of the other because then that party will feel like, wait a minute, why are you doing that to me in front of the other party? So you can definitely have a conversation in caucus. You can ask that question in caucus in order to, keep the process going without making any one party feels like their position is being attacked. Um, let's come to Oral.
Hey, greetings, Michelle. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I don't know if you all can see this, but I've got 2 pages of notes, front and back. And I'd like to ask Francis one thing before I get started. Francis, are there ever two mediators? Are there co-mediators ever used?
Yeah.
Okay. Michelle and everyone else, I finished basic mediation training. It was about 80 hours of training, and I have a follow-up this Saturday scheduled. And I'm in Maryland, so I'm very interested in what is going on. Michelle, and in reference to your opening statement, I thought it was great that you mentioned to the two participants this is a volunteer process. It will be a meaningful decision agreement, and you said that this will remain confidential. I thought that was great. Also, your reflections back to each individual to obtain clarity. And I thought you kept it moving along well. I have not mediated myself. I'm currently doing observation here in Maryland to get my feet stable. But I'm grateful for the invitation to witness what you all have done.
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I'm gonna just build on what Aurora said. It's good that you pointed out this is a confidential process and this is a voluntary process, but the entire mediation is built on those principles. So it's not enough to point those principles in passing, you know, since those principles are the foundation of the mediation. All right. Dylan, we're gonna come to you, and then we'll come to follow as okay. Also, all right. This is good. This is good. This document that you shared is good, but let's turn to Dylan.
Yeah, I have to take a look at those ground rules at a moment. So first off, well done, Michelle. I think there are a few things I saw you do really, really well. Um, and I did like that I could see you were trying to maintain a stable tone. And we're really trying to help guide the process as best as possible. I think a lot of what I've already heard from the others, I would agree with. Definitely, you want to strengthen the intro a little bit also so you're not breaking up the flow of each participant getting the chance to share. I think what ended up happening with Zami was he shared, and then you realized you wanted to add things, so it sort of broke up that flow, which can throw participants off a little bit, especially if they're not feeling your tone. Um, I would be interested to hear what was your thinking behind deciding to do this process all in plenary? Did you feel that worked, didn't work? What are your feelings reflecting on it?
They were being respectful enough that I didn't feel we needed to break out. And it really seemed like the crux of what each party wanted was to either explain or be explained to. And so I think that there's a little more success because, again, they were respectful. If they had been a little more aggressive toward each other, I probably would have said, hey, let's have a quick breakout and let me understand what it is you're doing. Or if I thought instantly after the intro that it seemed like it was going to have a very adversarial tone, I would have probably immediately gone into two breakout rooms with them. But no, I thought they were pretty respectful. So that was my thinking there.
Okay, no, that's really helpful for me to also understand a little bit of your own process. I think it was really interesting for me. You ended up with two people who are both very interesting acting in these roles, but also have slightly different personalities and were able to showcase that in a very interesting way. And I think I agree with Zami that the way you were trying to manage it, you had someone who was really combative, and you had someone who Francis is always an interesting person to have as a mediator because he also sometimes problem solves automatically, and I don't think he's even realizing that he's doing it. Um, but there was one thing that I did see that I do want you to think about, which is you do a good job of reflecting. And I do hear you reflame once in a while, but I also want you to be careful about acknowledging. And I think Zami brought this up at one point. I have a note here. At some point, I think while Zami was talking, you said, that that's your perspective. There's no such thing as normal. Um,
I did say
and I
that.
think there was a moment where it was
I did
basically
say that.
like you've completely shut Zami down
I did say
and
that.
you turned around and then went to Mike to Francis and were like, okay, now you say this. And at no point did you say, hey, Daniel, I can hear you're really frustrated, but you went straight into, okay, let's keep a civil tone. There's no such thing as normal here. Let me move over. So just be very careful with that because that could completely shut down a party. At that point, it could be, oh, hell no, you're clearly on his side. And you basically, especially with Daniel, who's been talking about, I feel like I'm being gaslit almost.
Hmm.
You've almost repeated that process with him. So I would, yeah, I'd be really careful to also take the time to acknowledge.
Daniel!
Could see it on Zami's face
The
too. Like,
Yeah!
the timer is what
Daniel!
saved you. Because as soon as that happened, like my head kind of turned. I looked. I was like, we don't have time for it. But I was
Yep,
about to go in.
I saw Zami's face. But just make sure that in that process, I think the one thing I was missing from you was acknowledging participants. And it doesn't have to be like super deep, but making sure you're taking the time to quickly acknowledge, hey, I get that this is frustrating, but I am in charge of the process and I'm trying to help guide you. If you don't do that, you do run the risk of having participants increasingly feel like this person is not only being tough on the process, but is being excessively tough on people.
Yeah.
And I do think that there were moments where like what Zami said, when you began to lead a little bit, it almost felt like I was watching a lawyer rather than a mediator because at that point I was this person is almost cross-examining the participants, which makes sense, but you want to take the time to give them space.
Yeah. The other thing
Um,
is that's like my biggest problem because I am a lawyer.
I, I'm I'm aware, and it's totally normal to want to do that, and it's something that some mediators, myself included, don't always do very well. But it's also about finding a good balance, about also being careful to acknowledge that, this is a difficult process, and that at the end of the day, it's about the parties. Which brings me to my other thing. Be very careful about um, not trying to push the mediation in a certain direction. At one point, um, you had been talking about, it sounds like you guys would be open to continuing this partnership. And Michael kind of said, yeah, I might be open to looking at something. And Daniel said, well, I'm thinking of maybe a buyout or a full restructuring. And you said something along the lines of, oh, that's an extreme fork to come to, or oh, and what was really difficult about that is you basically made it clear that you were kind of hoping they were going to go in a certain direction. Rather than turning around to the party, and I think Zami touched on this and saying, what does that look like for you? Like, let's actually talk it through. Like, do
Mhm.
you want to be bought out? Is that, what would a buyout mean for you? Like, focusing more on the question of what does this look like for you might have got Daniel to be like, well, no, I don't really want to be bought out. But by you sort of saying, oh, well, I didn't realize we were going in this direction, it almost made it sound as though you had an opinion of what solution you wanted to go in. And I think that can also end up alienating parties because if Daniel's not sure, he may suddenly feel like, oh, this person is trying to, fix this partnership, and I'm not sure I want that. And that the reason I asked you the question about caucus versus individual is that might have been a moment for me where you might have considered splitting apart and getting Daniel alone and saying, hey, I'm hearing from you now that you're not so certain about the partnership. Like, tell me what a solution would look like for you. And maybe one-on-one, Daniel might have said to you, like, I don't actually want to dissolve the partnership. I'm tired of Michael undermining me.
Mhm.
We don't know. But just food for thought. Be careful about making it seem like you are pushing for a specific solution. It is at the end of the day, the parties will have to come up with something if it's going to be sustainable.
Mhm.
But
Thank you.
otherwise, like I said, I did think you were really good at being tough on process. I could see that you were kind of keeping things moving forward. Um, yeah, I would be careful about the tone, but I also think you've got all the makings there to actually have a really good mediator's voice. So, um, well done. I know this is not always an easy one.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Um, Before I turn back the floor to Fola, I'm, maybe I'm curious from you, Michelle, like if you are to sit down and do an honest evaluation, do you feel like you had idea what the solution should look like?
Yeah. So I think that both Dylan, both of them are right. I saw that the parties, I do think sometimes I need to be careful about this. I come from like a
Mhm.
very feeling space. And when it seems like the parties still have some measure of relationship they wish to preserve, I always want to move in that direction, move in that
Yeah.
that interest in like just preserving the peace between two people, who at one time were cool enough that they wanted to be business partners.
Mhm.
So, of course, I'd like to see them come to some sort of resolution that involved maintaining their business relationship intact and their friendship probably. Um, but it's my job, like Dylan was saying, to do a better job of not showing my interest in the two parties and the kind of relationship I want them to have, and to
Mhm.
instead allow them to guide the process a little bit better. So I definitely appreciate the feedback. Um, and I'm sorry if I seemed like I wasn't listening to you, Daniel. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But it's good. It's good. It's good for me to know. And I really liked your note about uh my parent voice. I don't even realize I'm doing it sometimes. I really don't. It's how I talk all the time to the little boy. So, but that's not always great when you have two parties in conflict. And I don't want, you know, my roles in my personal life to impact my ability to seem neutral to parties
Hey,
in
I've
conflict.
got one question. This is Harold Michelle. Are you
Yeah,
a trained attorney?
I am.
Okay.
Mhm. Absolutely. Now let's come to Paula.
Hello, Michelle. How are you today? So,
Hey, fine.
when they started with the feedback, I was like, okay, let's have some brutal feedback, and I was like, okay, so what will be Michelle's receptiveness towards feedback? And I must say that I'm pretty impressed at the way and manner you have taken the feedback because I always say one thing: feedback is the breakfast of champions. So your receptiveness towards feedback is amazing, and so this is coming from a standpoint of someone who mediates in 8 countries, and I think I've pretty much handled close to 1,000 mediation sessions with an 85% success rate. And why this is really very important for context is for you to know how I've literally put your session under a microscope, and literally dissected it for you to have an understanding of where we're going to. And anything I say, the intent really is not to to make you a good mediator, because you are already a good mediator. The conversation is about better and best, and not only about better and best, but the conversation is about your ability to not only mediate in the States, but to mediate around the world. So those are the premises I will come from. And the starting point really will be, because everything means something, will be your camera angle. Now, you see, where online dispute resolution is concerned, I see only half of your face, in fact, barely to your mouth. So could you just bring down the camera down a bit to probably half of you? Yeah, keep going. Perfect. Now that's it.
Okay.
So you see why now, now I'll tell you why this is important, because yes,
Sorry.
no, that's
Trying to like.
yeah. So I'll tell you why this is important. I don't want to have to start staring like this just to see your face. So now these are the things that matter. Now I'm not even going to go into your introductory, your opening face, because I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I still don't have the opening face to heart. So what I sent to the group is the format that should be followed. You don't need to keep to it word for word, but you see, it's extremely important that when giving the opening statement, the structure, because the structure is really very important, and if you see what you have there, it starts from the way and manner you introduce yourself, and even down to how parties are introduced. I didn't even hear you ask the parties to introduce themselves. There was no, okay, yeah, we know it's a role play, but I didn't get to hear the name of the parties. I didn't even get to hear the name of the company. I didn't get to hear the role in the company. That would have been the first thing that would have happened, because you're basically just meeting them for the first time. Okay, hello, I'm Michelle. I'm Michelle Davis. You can please call me Michelle. Can I get to meet you? So what's your name and how do you want to be addressed? Now, like I said, I'm taking this from a global point of view because cultural intelligence is very important, Michelle. Now, in the States, I know you all are used to being on first name basis with each other. I'm meeting you for the first time, and I'm not even asking whether you're a miss or a missus. And I'm assuming you're going to be cool with being called Michelle. In Africa, we're very big on respect. You need to ask people how they want to be addressed. So it's really very important that I come from a very litigious country, Nigeria. You should Google us. We are very, 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 very angry people. So we overthink a lot of things. So it's really very important that when you introduce yourself, you let parties know how you want to be addressed. You want to be addressed as Mitchell. You want to be addressed as mediator Mitchell. And in the same breath, you ask the parties how they want to be, what their name is, and how they want to be addressed. That way, context, that is very important. And so that's basically the reason why I sent you the opening phase. And as much as we may talk about structure in mediation, one underlying principle that we should also focus on is rapport. Rapport is extremely important. You see, when I'm talking about rapport in the sense that, yes, you may be professional, but you should be able to manage communication in such a way and manner that the parties will be more receptive to what it is that you say. So I'm just going to look at the highlights I have. Mediation is all about rapport. I've ticked that. The parties didn't get to introduce themselves. I've ticked that. Okay, now, you came into the mediation session. Okay, Mitchell, I'm still seeing half of your face. You still need to bring the camera down a bit. Yeah. You still need to bring down the camera back. Okay. And I think you did it last time. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Now you came to the mediation session, assuming Daniel and Dylan, they know what mediation is all about. What if this is the first time coming into mediation? So there has to be, even if it's just maybe 3-4 minutes, a brief introduction on what mediation is all about. Your role as a mediator, what it is you're trying to achieve, among so many other things. So it's always best when you come into mediation session with the mindset that the parties don't even know what mediation is about. All they just know is that they are in a forum where they're trying to work themselves to have an amicable resolution of the issues in contention. So, even when you're done with the opening statement, like what I sent to you, it's always important to pause and ask the parties whether they have any questions. Why? Because they may have questions on what it is you're about to do. They may have questions on the timing to know how long the mediation session is going to take. They may have questions on pretty much anything at all. That ought to have been asked at the opening phase. Now, I noticed in between when one of the parties was speaking, your video went off. I think you switched off your video for a bit. Now, that should never happen in mediation, especially when it's online. There's a reason why it's called online dispute resolution. And there's a reason why all video, yeah, your video went off for a bit, probably maybe less than maybe 10, 15 seconds or so. You know, I think, and at that point, I think Daniel was speaking, you know, yeah, oh, okay, maybe it was a technical glitch. Oh, did you notice that too? Was it from your end or was it from my end? Okay, yeah. So I think that maybe it was a technical glitch. It probably didn't. But the point is that if whenever you're having mediation sessions, it's always very important your video is on. And the reason behind that is to enforce confidentiality, you know, and to show the parties that you're basically listening to what it is they're saying. So I've ticked that. Okay, bringing the camera down to your face, I've ticked that. Now, the instruction you were given, if you spoke about caucusing, you know, it was very clear from the instructions given that it was important that parties went into caucusing. It was clearly stated in the instruction. If you go back to the instruction of the mediator, you know, I don't think Dylan and Daniel were privy to that information, but I'm looking at the instruction here, and please permit me to read out the part that says that your immediate task is to slow the conversation, establish ground rules. That wasn't done. Ensure that each party has uninterrupted time to speak. There were times when parties were speaking, and I felt you interjected quite too often. You know, I get the part that you were trying. So for me, it was a case of they were heading somewhere, but the moment you interjected, kind of deflected the conversation into something else based on the question that you put into play. So for me, I didn't get. I felt that there were too many interjections, and yeah, then the instruction says you anticipate relying heavily on caucusing to allow for more candid communication. So I had to go back to the instruction given to you that, okay, if the instruction was clear about caucusing, why wasn't caucusing done? You know, so I felt there ought to have been a lot of caucusing done. And you see, mediation is, now for the parties, they may probably have flown with it, and there was a flow for you. But for mediators, I didn't get the sense that there was a structure in place. Now, when I'm talking about structure, there are essentially 6 steps towards mediation. The first is the preparation, which has to do with Francis sending you the brief on what the matter was. The second was the opening phase. Now, for the opening phase, I have the document I sent to you. Just follow. Now, the third is the agenda. You know, context is very important. I kept asking myself, okay, fine. So what does Daniel want from this mediation session? Can I outline what he wanted from the mediation session? You know, okay, fine, Daniel, okay, could you tell us what the issues are? He says the issue. So Daniel, so what would you want? Now, that came towards the tail end when he came up with 2 options, the option of a restructure and the option of a buyout. You know, those 2 options came in towards the tail end. If they had come in from the beginning, it would have helped greatly in contextualizing it. And because Francis is a problem solver, you know, he unconsciously moved that mediation session to a settlement. I promise you, Mitchell, if this was a regular mediation session, you would have struggled. If you had parties who didn't know anything about mediation, you would not have had any success. You know, because both parties would have maintained their strong points. Oh, Dylan, is it okay if I finish? Or you want to come in right now? Okay. Oh, thanks. So so the feedback I'm giving, Mitchell, is not because you're not good. You're good. It was excellent. But like I said, it's not the conversation is not about being a good mediator right now. The conversation is about being the best, you know, the best of the best. And that's basically what we are looking at. So now, so in terms of so it would have helped greatly if I knew contextually what Daniel wanted. It would have helped if I knew what Francis wanted. Now, once that had been done, you would have gone into caucusing with both of them. Now, if you had looked at Daniel's body language, it said a lot. You know, at times he would have his hands on his face, his chin. He had one or two occasional smiles on his face. I wouldn't call them smiles, maybe smirks actually, you know. And he was reclined. Now, more often than not, so because I'm an emotional intelligence specialist, I focus a lot on behavioral sciences. You know, it wasn't that when people are receptive to what is being said, they come closer to the screen. When people are not, they move back. You know, so he was pretty much back, you know, and I could see the occasional looked on his face. You know, these are things that because you see, human beings are more emotional than logical. But the interesting thing is that they take emotional decisions and then they rationalize it with logic. So it would have helped greatly if the agenda was contextualized. 1, 2, 3. This is what Daniel wants. 1, 2, 3. This is what Francis wants. Then you probably harmonize the agenda. Then you take them one after the other. So, Daniel, on the issue of restructure. So, can I have when you talk about restructure, do you want to give context to restructure? Are you talking about restructuring in terms of share capital? Are you talking about restructuring in terms of bringing in new people in? Are you talking about what's your definition of a restructure? I would have loved to have more context on restructuring. Now, if you're talking about the buyout, yes, I would have loved to have more context on buyout. So if you're looking at the buyout, do you have a figure in mind? You know, if you're looking at the buyout, what type of buyout are you looking at? Do you want to put all of this on the table for Francis to look at, and then we walk our way, you know, through all of that. So these were things that I saw, but if I'm now going to probably just give a holistic assessment, so on the following headings. Now, for your opening statement, like I said, I'm happy they all also alluded to it. Now, the solution to your opening statement was the document I sent. You may not have to follow it word for word, but you know it will guide you greatly to just basically look at it. So that takes care of the opening statement. Your coordination between parties, yes, was good. You know, I like the fact that you were able to have conversations with the parties. I like the fact that you were able to establish rapport. I also like the fact that you were able to show the willingness to collaborate. Now, the caucusing, there was really 0 to none. There was no caucusing. And I felt that for a mediation session as sensitive as this, you know, because so what I couldn't really ask was that, I couldn't get was that the issues, did they also have to do with a bit of ego trip on the part of Daniel or on the part of Francis? You understand? Were there other underlying issues outside of what was mentioned that would probably help you, you know? And as fantastic as the plenary may be, as open as the plenary may be, on the side of the parties, there's the awareness of the fact that the other side is there. So I'm going to have to be a bit careful about what I say. You know, I'm going to have to be a bit guarded about what I say. So, but once you go into caucusing, you know, the parties have this feeling of they have this sense of being alone, and they can even get to say quite a lot of things. You know, so for the caucusing, I think we could have done better. Now, of course, there was a lot of focus on positioning, which is what all they said they wanted. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. But the interests, why they say what they want, you know, and that is the arena that as a mediator you should play in. The parties play on the arena of positions, always taking to what they want. The mediator plays on the arena of interest. In fact, the job of the mediator is to take the parties from the arena of positioning and bring them into the arena of interest. So, yes, you want restructuring. There's an option of restructuring. Why do you think the option of restructuring will be the best way out of this issue? Yeah, don't you think that maybe there are one or two underlying issues that we could have looked at? That's interest. Okay, buyout. Why are we talking about a buyout now? Why do you think a buyout will be the way out of this? And you know the interesting thing is that when the parties get to speak enough around this, they get to even see the reason why one option will work well. So I didn't get the feeling that the parties played well in the interest space. Now, in terms of your disposition and demeanor, you have something that works very well for you, Mitchell. You exude confidence. You know, sometimes, and that confidence is good because you see, one thing we don't talk about well enough is the energy of mediation. You know, nobody comes into your mediation and wants to take over your mediation. your voice wouldn't even allow that, you know. So you have this presence that this presence that manages the mediation session. And I think I heard someone asking and they said you were an attorney. So I like the fact that you see that confidence is there. You know, I love the way you took control of the mediation process. You know, that was for me, that was beautiful, you know. And but overall, you understand, I also liked your reframing and your summarization, you know. You were able to basically kind of capture what they were saying. Of course, your composure was beautiful. But all in all, the summary of of the evaluation, you know, I think you did well. I'll be very honest with you. But like I said, um, if that's basically not the conversation about today, you know, the conversation is about yes, you're good, but how can you be better? Then the conversation again should also be about how if you leave the United States and you come to Africa, you know, or Lagos, Nigeria to be precise, and you want to mediate, you know, how will you be able to manage it? Because one undirected conversation that I think is also very important. Really, two things actually. Number one is a function of style. Everybody has a style, you know. So I would just want to call attention to your own style. You should have an idea of what your style is, and most importantly, too, there's also cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is key. You know, cultural intelligence in a sense, in a weird manner, you to have an understanding of the fact that I mediate in this way and manner in this space, would I be able to mediate in another space? The last but not least is this, and like I said, from a global point of view, is the awareness of the fact that we all have an accent, you know. So it may not be a problem for every other person. I felt she spoke a bit too fast. So I literally had to catch up, you know, but like I said, it's not something that so for those of you in the States and all that, it's okay. But for someone from Africa, I had to, you know, really kind of catch up. So if outside the shores of the US, you have to mediate outside, be conscious of the speed, you know, to be able to really get the attention of all. And I want to also apologize in advance if my feedback was a bit brutal. I just felt it just needed to put everything in perspective. And that's just basically it. Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you so much.
Dylan, I noticed your hand was up. Do you have
Francis, go ahead if you
No,
wanted to finish your thought.
no, you.
No, I just wanted to add one thing based on something Fola just said, because I think it plays to a strength of yours, Michelle. And I think I want you to reflect on it because I was interested. You actually identified this yourself, but you said part of the reason you didn't go into caucus was you felt you were engaging with Michael and Francis and you were guiding them well, and you noticed that Michael was looking away and you felt you needed to help bring him back into the conversation. I think the instinct was right. I think you were doing a good job of reading the parties, but I think that what you came up with was trying to bring them back into the space under your immediate terms. And I think that the instinct that you have there is the right one because you're realizing this person is becoming disengaged. But I think rather than thinking to yourself, let's put them back where they were before, ask yourself, what might be a different way of engaging with them? Because that might have been a really good moment to say, hey, we're going to switch into caucus really quickly and to say, hey, Michael, I notice you keep, kind of looking away and you seem a little uncertain about things. If I had actually encountered Daniel and Michael in real situation, I would have assumed that Michael is vaguely smug and is using intelligence to kind of try and move the process forward, and that Daniel is very defensive and may feel like he's being attacked right now. And I'm actually not sure I would have kept them in the same place for that long because my worry would have eventually been what happens if at some point Daniel becomes convinced that Michael is still kind of viewing him as the whiny business partner and is just, patronizing him. And I think you caught an instinct there of Michael seems disconnected. And then you just tried to bring them back to the original position. So I think what Fola said about thinking in terms of communication and body language, I think you have the right instincts. I think I would really challenge yourself when you find yourself in those situations. You're thinking a little bit like a parent of we need to confront this problem. You do want to do that. But in this situation, given the complexity, that might be a really good moment for you to kind of pull out the let's talk one-on-one and figure this out. just a food for thought because I thought you clearly picked up on something that was really important there.
Mm, absolutely.
Can I say one thing real quick,
Yes,
Francis?
please.
Sorry,
Please.
I just want to say, Michelle, that I do feel like it was a good call to keep us in the big room. I know I didn't say that before. I do think it was a good call because I wanted Dan or Michael Francis to directly talk to me, and I wanted to talk to them. And so when I did get interrupted, part of it was because I was like, don't like part of the defensiveness that came out in the character was I want to tell him how I feel. I want him to say in front of other people that my contribution is important. He needs to admit that in front of people. So I think sometimes it's actually, I felt like that worked in your favor in this situation because based off of my character, I was like, no, he wants him to kind of eat crow a little bit and be like, yeah, you are important. This couldn't have happened if it weren't for you. And so I thought that it was good that you kept us in that session because I want to talk to him directly anyway and say, no, you're not gonna make it seem like I'm just tripping. So I know other people thought maybe do the caucusing. Um, but I felt like that was a good call.
I'm going as a party now. As a party, I was telling you what you wanted to hear as a party. And I think that so whereas you as Michelle, I know we're spending a lot of time on caucus, whereas you as Michelle can call for caucus, I think constantly reminding parties that they have that option is the safest way forward because then if parties feel like there is a need for it, they can initiate that themselves, you know. I think the last question that I wanted to ask is, and this is now, it's gonna open for just a 1 minute discussion, is if you remember something down the road, do you go back to like maybe I want to hear from like everyone here. Michelle forgot few things in our introduction, and then after Zami finished his opening statement, she was like, "Oh yeah, I remember this." Then she started explaining those. I'm curious, assuming you were the mediator, you remember something that you forgot to share late in the process. How would you handle it?
Okay, can I go first?
Yeah.
So for me, you mediation, the cornerstone of mediation is flexibility. And I think that point needs to be emphasized that parties are human beings and it's really very, very okay to forget. So if I had to choose between a point being added and a point being excluded, I would always choose a point being added. So it was very important that she needed to say those things because those are the features of mediation. So yes, it can come in at any point in time. However, like I said, it will help greatly if there was a guide. And that's what I said. Everybody needs a guide. So even if she was not going to follow it stricto sensu, yeah, but if she probably had it open on her screen, she will probably she would remember that, okay, I think I need to say this. I think I don't need to say this. But because it was basically extempore, it came from my head. That was why it felt as if things were not being sequential. So what I have there is most like it's just like a guide, really. So if the simple response to your question is yes, it can be added at any, even during mediation, even when parties are speaking, she goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And you see, when that happens, I'll tell you what it does. It humanizes the process. It shows that okay, fine, she's human. It shows that, and as a human being, people tend to forget things. So yes, the simple response, it can come in at any point in time. That's my own
Zami?
feedback.
Let's come back to Zami since it was after your opening statement. That's when Michelle remembered few things that she forgot in our opening. Like, how did that made you feel?
So because what I said was not acknowledged first, I did not like it. And so yes, it humanizes the person. However, in a mediation, to me, or any discussion, regardless if it's a mediation or something else, when someone shares how they're feeling and what's going on for them, for the response, the first thing that comes out of someone's mouth to ignore what the person said, again, like completely is like, all right, like defensiveness, right? So if there was some acknowledgement first, um, then I would have been fine with it. Because it could have even been like acknowledgement and, could have said, I'm so like, thank you, Daniel, whatever I said. I don't remember what I said, but acknowledgement of what I said and then say, I'm so happy that you all are being so open, or it's great that you're being so open about your discussion, how you're feeling. Everything here is confidential. And so it's important for us to keep that openness going. So like
Mhm.
I would just roll it into how I'm responding to them and like, cause affirm, do the reminder of confidentiality, and then just keep going.
I don't have anything else to add. I think yeah, it- it's not in dispute that you can add, anything at any point in time, but you definitely before you add, you definitely have to acknowledge, what the other party said, before you come in to add, what you felt like you should add. Dylan, is
Yeah,
line up?
yeah, I can only add. I mean, everything you guys have already said already makes a lot of sense for me. I think if you realize you've forgotten something, it is good to still bring it in. It is important to recognize the flow of where you're at and where parties are at. If parties are in the middle of having a really heated debate, stopping them in the middle to say, "Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that this is a confidential process," can be more um, enraging and disruptive than helpful. That being said, there are times when it is okay to interrupt. And I would, I see Fola has added some really good ones on there, but you are still in control of the process. If parties are becoming abusive towards each other, if parties are constantly answering the phone, if parties are doing things that are actively disrupting the process, then it is okay to step in and say, hey, by the way, I know I didn't mention it before, but I am going to ask you guys to turn off your phones during this process. So it's also about recognizing the balance. You do not want to do anything that disrupts the process. If the process is already being disrupted, then it is okay to step in as the person who is in charge of that process and say, hey, I realized I didn't mention this, but just to clarify. And that can be phones, it can be someone saying, I'm gonna, report all of this to my lawyer. It can be making clear to parties, I'm here to facilitate this process, but this process is about you guys. So if parties are going through the process, you do not want to disrupt it to add in a note. You should find a good moment to say, I as Zami said, if you're able to roll it in, and if not, you can say, hey, I want to just take a quick moment to mention something I forgot, which is just so you guys are aware, this process is 100% confidential, or I'm taking notes, but they're going to be destroyed after this. Um, if you can make it organic, that's great, but I know that sometimes that's hard to do. I struggle with that. So but just remember that it is really the idea of setting all of these norms is to guide the process and to make sure that people have an understanding of how this is working. If they are the ones disturbing it, it is okay to say to them, hey, you know, I am going to ask you guys to do this. It's the only thing I wanted to add.
Thank you so very much, Dylan.